After being struck by the quarantine enforcement platform, the Aurora began plummeting towards the surface, and anyone unable to reach an escape pod was killed. This is the first thing we learn upon leaving the life pod, but is it really the case? Could anyone have survived inside the Aurora? It's more likely than you might think. Now, before we can see if anyone survived, we need to figure out how many were on board Aurora when she foundered. The Aurora had a combined 157 passengers and crew. In the case of disaster, she was equipped with 50 life pods, enough for up to 100 people. But of course, these were not all full when they launched. Including the player and his life pod, we find 9 life pods carrying a total of 14 people. We can use this to estimate an average of 1.56 people per life pod. This times 50 means around 78 people got into the life pods. With just over half of the crew still on board, we need to find out what their survival probability would be. While we lack the interstellar spacecraft for proper data, we do have airplanes, which are also large flying masses of metal that sometimes crash. The statistics vary, but there are a few things to consider. First, many people would still have been trying to get down to the life pods, and wouldn't have had a chance to properly brace themselves. On the other hand, Captain Hollister's refusal to abandon ship meant that Aurora's descent was at least somewhat controlled. Even in the most severe plane crashes, the odds of survival are still around 55%, and this seems to best fit the scenario. Finally, we know the captain died, so we can subtract him, bringing the grand total to a potential 42 survivors. So, what happened to them? Awakened by the explosion, a man races out of his room to see what's going on. The scene is one of pure chaos, people running every which way, alarms blaring, and a single message echoing throughout the halls.
Attention. Life failure imminent. All personnel abandon ship.
The survivors race toward the lower decks, trampling one another in a desperate bid for survival. However, it soon becomes clear they won't all make it in time. The survivors brace with whatever they can and prepare themselves for the end. But for many, the end doesn't come. While the ship appears intact on the outside, the scene within is an utter calamity. Anything not held down is thrown about. Floors and walls collapse, trapping their occupants within, and fires rage throughout the ship. In an instant, the Aurora, the only home the crew have known for the last 13 months, is reduced to a twisted, smoldering wreck. Slowly but surely, the people begin to emerge. They are scared and confused, but they still have their lives. For those with only minor injuries, there wasn't much immediate danger. Sure, they were trapped inside the ship, but that also meant that hostile fauna and Kara, at least for now, couldn't get in either. For the first few hours, the people inside the Aurora might have actually had an easier time than those in the life pods. We can find food and water scattered throughout the ship, so we know basic survival wasn't a problem. But what about the fires? Surely they would have consumed the inside of the ship, burning people alive and choking the enclosed spaces with smoke. Surprisingly not. Most of the ship is made up of inflammable materials, which helped prevent the fire's spread. As for the smoke, it seems the Aurora actually had pretty good ventilation systems. In other enclosed spaces, such as the lifepod or Cyclops, the player can be heard having breathing difficulties with all the smoke. But when you visit the Aurora, you can stay as long as you like with no adverse effects. It seems for all of Altera's shortcomings, their firefighting systems were actually up to scratch. While their comrades were fighting for their lives in the life pods, the people inside began gathering food, tending to the injured, and trying to discern what just happened. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Water soon began flooding lower portions of the ship, taking many of the survivors by surprise. The group worked to get everyone higher up, but those trapped by debris had no way out. Try as they might, the group eventually had to abandon them, and their cries soon echoed throughout the ship. Those who were able to make it up tried to figure out what to do next. But with all the exit points flooded or buried, there wasn't really much they could do. Similar to CTOU, a number of people likely thought to repair the long-range comms, but all attempts seemed to have failed. The smaller groups reconvene and began distributing the food they were able to find, but to their surprise, many seemed to have lost their appetite. Others start complaining of headaches, fever, and even nausea. Something is making the group sick, and it doesn't take them long to figure out what. The symptoms they are exhibiting are all clear signs of radiation poisoning, and there is only one culprit. The drive core must have been damaged in the crash, and radiation is slowly spreading throughout the ship. The group gathers radiation suits, but there just aren't enough for everyone. The only option is to go down and physically repair the drive core. A few brave volunteers attempt to make their way down, but find their path blocked at every turn. As we now know, the front sections of the Aurora became mostly blocked off from the rest of the ship, essentially separating it into two sections. The party continues looking, desperately trying to find some way to stop the radiation. But as they push deeper into the bowels of the ship, they make a horrific discovery. When Aurora foundered, water wasn't the only thing she let in. Cave crawlers managed to enter the ship through gaps in the hull plating. Now, the nimble arthropods begin attacking survivors across the ship. While one or two cave crawlers aren't that hard to deal with, groups of half a dozen or more pose a significant threat. For one group, the onslaught got so bad that they attempted to barricade themselves deeper in the ship. But the arrival of cave crawlers had also brought a second, much more dangerous problem. First feeling mildly itchy, many of the survivors are soon overcome with coughing and skin irritation. Unbeknownst to them, they have become infected with the Kara bacterium, brought on board by the infected cave crawlers. Had they been outside, the effects would have been slowed as they consumed small amounts of enzyme 42 through the local fish. But inside of the ship, the infection was able to spread almost unimpeded. For everyone on board, their fate was sealed. Repairing the drive core while fighting off cave crawlers would have been hard enough, but with the Kara, it was merely a matter of time. Most of the survivors perished from a combination of radiation and the bacterium. Those who found protection from radiation managed to hang on the longest, before two succumbing to the bacterium. Ladies and gents, thanks for making it to the end. If this is your first time here, feel free to check out some of my other videos, and if you like what you see, please subscribe. It helps out more than you might think. Well, that's all from me. I'll see you in the next one.